And when Irving Kirsch and his colleagues in 2002 had access to some of the first data, they got 47 studies of these six directly from the FDA, and they of the six most widely prescribed antidepressants approved between, I believe, 1987 and 1999, and they got these studies under a Freedom of Information request, and they analyzed the data much as the FDA is doing, but they looked at efficacy. They looked at the response of the drug-treated groups and the placebo groups on the Hamilton Rating Scale for Depression. And they saw that on average over these, I think it was 18 or 22,000 patients altogether, on average, the score difference between the drug-treated patients and the placebo-treated patients on a 50-point scale or a 62-point scale, the same scale has two versions, the difference between drugs and placebo was 1.8 points. A less than 2-point difference between drug-treated patients and placebo patients. Now that difference clinically, in terms of the actual improvement that you see in the person, makes no difference. 2 points out of 60 means nothing, but statistically it's significant. And overall, this is the basis on which drugs get approved because of statistical significance, but really no real clinical significance overall. I wondered about this. I said, is this still going on? So I just did a study. I did a brief little survey. Last August, I went on Medline and I looked at the past year, any SSRI randomized controlled trial, first-time English language publication published in the last year, and I found 7 trials. There were 5 adult trials, 2 pediatric trials, 1 geriatric trial, 1 tested patient weight restoration for anorexia, 5 tested depression, 1 looked at women with breast cancer who were depressed, various kinds of conditions, but mostly about depression. And again, in none of the trials did the drug response exceed placebo response. In every single trial, in 4 of the trials, the drug and placebo were exactly equivalent, no difference. And in 3 trials, the placebo did better. This is very powerful. In other words, the placebo response is very powerful, and it's continually there. And that's what speaks to me as a researcher. When I look at this data, I say, my goodness, how can this inert pill, and what factors go into this placebo to make people respond about as well as they do to very active drug that's taken years and hundreds of millions of dollars to put out and to promote? How can this lowly little placebo, the inert placebo, do just as well? That's what clinical trials tell us, and that's what we should be emphasizing. And the fact, though, is that these different data sets to tell us that the placebo is almost as good as the active drug are using all sorts of strategies to in fact minimize the placebo response. They're having placebo washout or placebo lead-in phase. What is the point of that? Is to identify early placebo responders. And so you exclude them from the pool of subjects who will then be randomized. That's the point of having a placebo lead-in. Who is going to respond to placebo at the very beginning of the trial so they can just be excluded from who will then continue the trial. There's also the use of the inert placebo, which is giving a person flour or sugar, which is supposedly have no real, significant physiological activity. But even with an inert placebo, in the latest published trials, you're seeing placebo response is extremely powerful, and sometimes better than an active drug. So this is very important. When you use an active placebo, which is a drug, let's say like diphenhydramine, or perhaps caffeine, which has psychotropic effects, but you find that the placebo response rate is even higher than when you use an inert placebo like sugar or flour. Now, if an inert placebo, as we are seeing, can produce almost the response that an active drug can do, then why shouldn't we be using active placebos? That might literally overwhelm, it might lay waste to the antidepressant drug response. Now, why are these not used in clinical trials? I looked at neurology pain treatments as an example, and I find that active placebos are regularly used in neurology for pain treatments. In randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials, They use active placebos that will induce some kind of sensation that will make the subject in the trial feel like they're getting something. And so you would wonder, well, my goodness, maybe we should be using that in depression trials. So I looked to see, was there a single SSRI trial that used an active placebo comparison? I couldn't find a single one. And I guarantee you that there's not a single one in this database of 372 trials that the FDA mentioned. I think if there was an active placebo comparison, they would tell us and they would exclude it. But they don't. Time up already? Okay, time's up. Sorry, folks. Thank you very much.